Echoes of a silent promise. Catherine had always believed in the simplicity of love. She had seen her parents' unwavering bond, the kind that withstood years, trials, and everything life threw their way. Her heart yearned for something similar, an undeniable connection that would fill the emptiness she often felt within. But life hadn't exactly followed the script she had imagined. At 30, Catherine found herself living in the hustle and bustle of New York, working long hours at a law firm. Her life was full of meetings, deadlines, and city noise, but it lacked the quiet moments that whispered of love, of passion. She had been hurt too many times to let anyone in again, yet somewhere deep inside her, the desire to feel that deep connection lingered. It was on one particularly mundane Tuesday that everything changed. Catherine was heading home from work, exhausted from a long day at the office, when she decided to take a detour through a nearby park to clear her head. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves falling gently from the trees. As she strolled along the path, lost in her thoughts, her gaze fell on a man sitting on a bench, reading a book. It wasn't his appearance that caught her attention, though. It was the way he held the book, as if the words on the pages weren't just stories, but something deeper, something that spoke to him on a personal level. There was an intensity in his eyes, a quiet longing that seemed to reflect her own. Without thinking, Catherine found herself walking toward him, the pull of something she couldn't name guiding her steps. As she neared, the man looked up, his eyes locking with hers. The moment their gazes met, Catherine felt a jolt of recognition, like she had known him in another life, in another time. "Hello," he said softly, as if he'd been waiting for her. "Hi," Catherine replied, her heart racing. There was an unfamiliar calmness in his voice, but it seemed to have the power to make her forget everything around them. "Do we know each other?" His lips curled into a smile, one that held a trace of mystery. "In a way we do," he replied, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm Daniel." Catherine stared at him, trying to place him, but nothing seemed familiar. Yet there was something about him, something about the way he looked at her, as though he had known her for years. "I don't think I've seen you before," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But you seem familiar." Daniel stood up from the bench and took a step closer to her, his presence overwhelming. "Perhaps you will soon," he said, "because this isn't the first time we've met." The words hung in the air, like a secret, a riddle that Catherine couldn't quite decipher. She took a step back, her pulse quickening. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "Give it time," Daniel said, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm here now. We're meant to meet again. Fate has its own way of bringing things back together." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. There was something strangely reassuring about his words, yet something unsettling as well. She didn't believe in fate, not anymore. She had been let down by love, by people she had trusted, and had built walls around her heart to protect herself. But there was something in his eyes, something that made her want to let go of those walls just for a moment. Before she could respond, Daniel stepped back, as if sensing her hesitation. "I know this is all too sudden," he said, his voice softer now, "but I promise you, there's a reason we crossed paths tonight. And one day you'll remember." With those words, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Catherine stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. Was it just a coincidence, or was there something more to their encounter? She couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting had been somehow destined, like she had been waiting for him her whole life. For the next few days, Catherine couldn't stop thinking about him. She found herself walking through the park again, hoping to see him, to understand what he had meant by, "One day, you'll remember." But Daniel never appeared. She convinced herself it was nothing more than a fleeting encounter, a figment of her imagination. But then one evening, a letter arrived. The envelope was simple, unmarked except for her name written in elegant script. Catherine's heart skipped a beat as she opened it. The letter read, "I know you don't remember yet, but we shared something once. Something pure and timeless. It was a love that never truly faded, only waited. When you're ready, you'll recall it all. And when you do, I'll be here, waiting." "Daniel." Catherine's hands trembled as she read the letter. How did he know? How did he know her so well? And why did it feel like the words on the page were calling to her, pulling her back to a time she couldn't remember? The next few weeks were a blur of confusion and longing. Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel had been part of her life long before their chance meeting in the park. She visited places they had both frequented, searching for any clue, any memory that might unlock the truth. Then one evening, while going through an old box of personal belongings, she found a photograph. It was an image of a younger version of herself, sitting on the steps of a beach house, laughing with a man beside her. The man in the picture had the same eyes as Daniel, deep, knowing, and full of love. Her heart stopped. It was him. It was Daniel. They had been together before. The memories flooded back in an instant. Shared moments by the sea, walks through the rain, whispered promises of forever. But something had torn them apart. A misunderstanding, a mistake, a choice that led them down separate paths. Catherine realized the truth. She had loved him once, deeply and completely. And somehow, despite the years, despite the distance, the love had never really gone away. She knew what she had to do. That night, she went back to the park, the place where they had first met again. As she walked through the familiar paths, her heart pounded with anticipation. And there he was, sitting on the same bench, the same book in his hand. But this time, when he looked up, there was no hesitation in her steps. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaking. He smiled, that same knowing smile. "I knew you'd come. I remember," she said, her voice breaking. "I remember everything." Daniel stood up, taking her hands in his. "We've waited long enough, Catherine. Now let's finish what we started." And as they stood there, in the quiet park under the soft glow of the streetlights, Catherine realized that love had never truly left her. It had just been waiting for her to remember, waiting for her to trust again. Over the following days, Catherine couldn't stop replaying every moment of her past with Daniel. The love they had shared wasn't just something fleeting, it was something deeper. How had she let go of that connection? What had happened between them to break that bond? The more she searched her memory, the more she realized there were pieces missing, hidden by time and circumstance. One night, Catherine received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated before picking it up, but when she did, the voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Daniel. "I've been trying to reach you," he said, his voice urgent. "There's something you need to know, something we both need to understand." She met him in the same cafe where they had shared their first date, the place where everything had felt so perfect. But now there was a weight in the air, an unspoken tension between them that neither of them could ignore. Daniel's face had changed since she last saw him, a mix of sadness and resolve in his eyes. "I've made mistakes, Catherine," he admitted, his voice raw, "but I've never stopped loving you." As they talked, Daniel revealed more than Catherine was ready to hear. The reason they had parted ways years ago wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. It was betrayal, a series of lies that had destroyed the foundation of their relationship. Catherine felt her world unravel as he spoke, but she couldn't bring herself to walk away. The connection between them was too strong, too real. Daniel showed her a box of letters, written over the years, that he had kept all this time. Each one was addressed to her, each one filled with apologies and hopes for a future they never had. He had never truly moved on, even when it seemed like they were both living separate lives. "I've waited for you," he said softly. "I never gave up on us." As Catherine sat with him, reading the letters, she realized that the pain of their separation was not something that could be easily forgotten. But there was also something healing in reading his words. The rawness of his emotions, his desire to make things right. The pieces of their past were coming together, revealing a love story that had been suspended in time. Days turned into weeks, and Catherine found herself spending more and more time with Daniel. They would walk through the city, rediscovering places they had once visited together, trying to piece together the fragments of their shared history. Every corner they turned, every familiar sight, felt like it held a memory waiting to be unlocked. But even as they rekindled their connection, doubt lingered in Catherine's heart. Could they truly rebuild what they had lost? Could they trust each other again after all that had happened? The pain of betrayal was still fresh in her mind, and she wasn't sure if forgiveness was something she could easily give. One evening, as they sat in silence, Daniel finally spoke the words Catherine had been dreading. "There's something you still don't know," he said quietly. "There was another reason why we had to separate. It wasn't just the lies. It was something bigger, something I couldn't tell you before." His voice trailed off, and Catherine felt a knot form in her stomach. The truth he revealed that night was nothing short of a revelation. It was a story that stretched back further than either of them had realized, a secret that had been buried for years. And in that moment, Catherine understood that their love wasn't just bound by time, it was bound by fate, by forces beyond their control. And now they had to choose whether they would let the past define them or whether they would finally move forward, together. This extended version brings even more layers of mystery, regret, and hope to the story. The evolving relationship between Catherine and Daniel adds complexity, while the new revelations about their past bring fresh intrigue and emotion.